Hello, welcome back. So if you're following my video sequentially, then we must be right now in the process of creating a load generator. Okay. In the last video, we discussed about test development phase, and we said that let's create a load generator. And the goal of this video to introduce you to how to create load generators. All right. So now let's take for a moment the scenario where Mr. X is browsing to website called abc.com. He went to the browser, and the browser he just simply typed abc.com. Then assume that this is the server for abc.com somewhere in the world, and through the internet Mr. X is able to browse the website abc.com and did some activities. Let's say the first activity is the abc.com, and then he clicks something. Let's say that the activities are something like this: a1, a2, a3, and so on. So if you see, whenever he goes and then type abc.com and enter, then actually what the browser does, sends some http commands. Okay, so browser sends some http commands to the server, and then server responds in HTML, and the browser interprets those HTML, and then user does something else, and that procedure continues. And those are the activities A1, A2, and A3. So when we want to do a load testing, one option is that let's have, like Mr. X, 100 Mr. X, say Mr. Y and Mr. K, and so on. Let's say get 100 of them and ask them to do all these activities, and so that we can stress the system. But that is not practically possible. Even if you get 100 of them, but you cannot coordinate with all of them to do a proper testing. All right. So therefore, what we want to do, is there any way we can replace Mr. X with a program? Okay, and at the end of the day, if we know what are the activities being done, then we can submit equivalent HTTP commands to the browser and read the response and analyze and measure what is the time it takes to load the page. So that is the motivation here. So the motivation here is to develop this program. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, what is the basic idea of developing that program? So let's say this is your program and this is your server. Okay, so this is your server, and the first thing is that what you need to do, you need to create a socket connection between the program and the server, and that is something called a pipe. So the step one is create a socket between the program, or let's call this client, to server. Okay, so that's the first step. All right, and once this socket is created, then let's read from this activity list which activity needs to be done. Okay, and the second step would be read what action needs to be performed from the activity list. And what about this action is essentially a HTTP command. So what you do, you send that HTTP command on this pipe which you have created. Okay, the next step would be send commands to the server, where using the pipe which you have created. Then the next step would be wait for the response. So basically, whenever you give this HTTP command, the web server on this machine is going to respond you back. The server is going to respond you back in HTML, and also a status code about what kind of response is that. So wait for response, or read the response. Actually, so it's not wait, actually wait and basically read the response and analyze. Then what about, so basically at this step you send the request, at this step you receive the response from the server. Okay, so log keep track of time t1 at which you send a request, and keep track of time t2 on which you receive the response. Then in the next step, in step 5, what you do, you log t2 minus t1, this is called elapsed time for this request, to a result file. Okay. Then step 6, you repeat step 2 to step 5 for all those activities A1, A2 and A3. Repeat step 2 to 5 for all those activities that is available. Then finally you close the socket. Okay, so this socket is gone, there's no more connection. So essentially this is the steps that you can do for creating a load generation tool. Looks very simple, and eventually if you write in Java, this is how it probably something going to look like. In line number 14, we are creating that socket, and when you create that socket, you have to give the host name and port number, and the host name is abc.com, port number is 80. You create two streams. In one stream we are going to send a command, and in the input stream you receive response. Okay, and then in the writer object, what I'm doing, this is where I'm going to write to the socket all those HTTP commands. In the line number 18, I am giving the command to get the page. The page is what? Page is index.html. So what I'm doing is basically saying in that, basically I'm giving the command here in this socket that, okay, get me index.html of abc.com. Then certain crlf means that new line, so that is what I'm sending. That is what HTTP requires for formatting purpose. All right, and then once I send these commands, the command started to send on line number 17, and in line number 18, 19, 20, so basically this is where I am reading the response back, and once I read all those response, then I'm closing the socket. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep track at this line what is the time t1, and at this time what is the time t2. So t2 minus t1, that is what I'm going to put in a log file, and that log file is my result file. Okay, so essentially what this man was doing here is substituted by this program. Okay, so as you see, like, instead of hiring thousands of these people, what we did essentially, we substitute this x with a program. And if you look, this is something like this. This x is gone, no more in the picture, and this was driven by a program, and this program is going to do exactly the same thing whatever the user x was doing. And guess what, if I have another program like this which I can create very easily, that will going to simulate u2. So since this is not a real user, this is what is called a virtual user. Okay, so this is what a virtual user, and it is going to behave like a real user, but actually this is a program. And we use this technique to load test, to stress the server. Like, once we create, and this can be done as a Java thread, and we can have thousands, even millions of thread going to execute different commands, and so do a real life simulation. We do not need anymore the real user, and this is what I meant by a load generation tool. Thank you.